Welcome to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome everyone to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. We are so excited that you're joining us today. How are you doing today, Jana?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's a fall day here in the South. You know, we got some sun, we got some cold, we got a little pumpkin thing going on. You know, it's good stuff.
We had frost this morning by us, so I don't know. It's a little bit more chillier than I thought it was going to be. I mean, we went right from the oven to the freezer there for a second, but it's good. Hey, we have a wonderful guest. We're both very excited about this. We have Patrick Hardy with us today, and we're excited to meet with him and talk to him and learn about what he does. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff and Jen. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking to you today.
So, Patrick, do me a favor and just give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are and how you got to where you're at today. And then we're going to kind of jump into what you do because it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, I was the CEO of a disaster management company I started many years ago. I've been a disaster professional for 20 plus years. I started as a lifeguard when I was in high school. Then I went into EMS. And so I was a medic on an ambulance. And then I was in college at the same time. I finished. And then something sort of seminal happened. You know, I was a political scientist. That was one of my three majors. And I thought to myself, I got to have some kind of something that really drives me, some sort of a passion, because everyone, if you study political science, everyone has a passion. They want to eradicate nuclear weapons. They want peace in the Middle East. They want to, do something that they feel is important to them personally. And I didn't have any of that. And so for about a year, I just did different things. And then all of a sudden, in August of 2005, it occurred. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life. At that time, they had Hurricane Katrina, and when I was astonished that a country of our size and sophistication was not able to respond effectively. So without an introduction, without knowing anybody, I wrote a letter. And I mean that. I mean a letter. I don't mean an email. I don't mean a text. I don't mean a tweet. Wow. I don't mean any of that. I mean a letter, a cold letter to the governor of Louisiana. And I said, I'm a nobody. I don't have any political connections. I don't have anything, but I graduated valedictorian in all my majors. I had a 4.0, and I did this and this and this. And I would just like to be a great emergency manager. I had this great vocational background. I have this interesting academic background, and I want to be there. This is clearly a seminal event in the history of disaster management. And I got a call a couple days later saying we'd never gotten a letter like this before. So here's the deal. This is the deal. We'll fly you to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Woo-hoo! And we'll give you a place to live. Oh, you're going to love this, Jana. I lived in the state police barracks. So they gave me a room.
But you ate well, Patrick. You ate well because that's where my family's from. My in-laws, my husband's full-blooded Cajun. So you ate well there, didn't you?
I did. Well, they let me have. Well, the funny thing is that they gave me cafeteria rights, but a lot of my colleagues that I later interacted with said, "Hey, listen." This is a very South thing. And Jen, I'm sure you understand, Jeff. I don't know if you're from the South also, but this is a very Louisiana thing and very much in the South. I lived in Mobile, Alabama. I lived in all kinds of places in the South. And everywhere I've gone, people have said, do you want to have dinner with me and my family? And I thought, I'm a Californian. We're an amiable crowd, but we're very independent-minded people. And my family is extremely independent. Everybody lives on their own. My parents live in one location. My brother lives in another. I live in another. So, I mean, we only interact by text these days because we hardly ever see each other. We consider they're close, but that's a California we call it the California close because that's all you do, right? But in the South, people literally invite me to their homes, and I met their daughters and their sons and their nephews and their uncles, and they treated me like I was an ambassador from another country. As a matter of fact, when I gave a presentation later, they said, how did you feel? I said, it's like I'm the ambassador from Japan, and I was visiting, and these Americans wanted me to feel welcome. And so they kind of just invite me. Anyway, so I had a place to live, State Police Barracks. I had cafeteria food. They gave me a PT Cruiser to drive around
Oh
in,
my
which was,
gosh, that's awesome.
and they said, we'll give you a whopping $1,500 a month. And for that, you agree to work 120 hours a week.
Oh my
You do that?
gosh.
And I said, I'm on the next plane because I mean, they ended up offering me free trainings. I trained at all the anti-terrorism consortium schools. I went to all these, every vacation. I went and did stuff on my days off, which clearly there wasn't many days off.
So,
But
yeah.
when there was, I was volunteering with the Red Cross. I volunteered with the Humane Society. I volunteered. I did all kinds of things because I wanted a ton of experiences. I got amateur radio background. I learned
Yeah.
everything I was teaching a paramedic school. I helped write a textbook on emergency management. So I was doing a lot of things because I just wanted to maximize the experience because I said, if I'm going to do this discipline and if I want to become what I want to become, this is what I have to do. And it was an incredible experience. So from there, I went to Britain. I studied British and European emergency management. I came back and I was one of the senior emergency managers on the oil spill.
Wow,
And then
that's
from
so
there,
interesting.
yeah, and I opened a business, and my company ended up becoming the largest small business disaster management company. We're worked with about 250,000 small businesses around the United States. So
That is fabulous. So, Patrick, tell us the process. Obviously they call you, like, let's say for the oil spill, they call you and say, get your butt here. We got problems. How do you assess? I'm sure you have a team, but just give me kind of the high level overview of how you assess these kinds of situations. And do you have do you have disasters that you wouldn't cover, like because they're too small or too large, or give our listeners kind of the rundown of how you assess this.
yeah, I have a philosophy. If it's a disaster to you, it's a disaster to me.
Okay.
And one of the things I've actually done, and one of the things I've discovered, and is my message now, is I tell people this: if you prepare for a disaster, you'll never experience one. And when I was working with some of my early clients, I used to put this in practice. I used to say to them, they'd say, okay, we had a hurricane come through and something would happen, the property was damaged or closed out of business. And they said, oh, I can't believe it's a horrible disaster. I said, it's not a disaster yet. I'm not going to let it become a disaster. We're going to turn this around and make you stronger afterward. That's my goal. That's what I do. When I assess a situation, I say, can I make them stronger as a result? I don't do the doom and gloom thing. I don't do the Chicken Little thing. I don't do the blood and guts thing. I always tell people I'm here to empower you and make you stronger. That's how I know you will never experience a disaster for the rest of your life, no matter where you live, whether you live where I live in California, which is seismic country, or if you're down south where you deal with, hurricanes and massive tropical storms, or you're in the Northeast and you're dealing with, blizzards and nor'easters and that sort of thing, wherever. And I even do this. I mean, you guys are going to find this funny. I don't know, and don't ask me. I don't know how I got this client. I don't know. I would say I wish I could claim it was great entrepreneurial acumen, but I would be lying to you. So one day, one of my emergency planners emails me and said, hey, we got this really funny client. I said, what is it? She said, well, it's a massive hair salon. And I said, okay, I know we've done those before. She goes, in Zimbabwe.
Oh
I
my
said,
gosh.
in Zimbabwe? And they said, yeah. And so we did their threat assessment, and we determined that the biggest threat that they had to their business was not earthquakes, not hurricanes, not lions and tigers and bears on mine, nothing like that. It was inflation. Inflation ended up being their worst thing because Zimbabwe has massive inflation. I mean, we're just it's like 10,000% per year, something like that.
Wow.
So it's awful. So we literally helped create them an artificial currency that they could use with their clients. And they literally use this microcurrency
Oh,
within their own business. And that works
interesting.
them. And I was working with the planner saying, I'm going to help develop a solution to this. And that's what I told all my planners. You ever run across something cool, bring it up. I feel like the archaeologist, and everybody's like digging in the sand somewhere. And I go, if you
Yeah.
run across King Tut's tomb or you run across something cool, like I'm going to be the guy who's going to assist this one. And that was really fun. And that's what I do with all kinds of businesses. I work with an alligator farm in Georgia, and we literally figured out how to evacuate alligators off property. What do you do with these great creatures?
Wow.
So it's just really fun for me to be able to deliver these things because I just say, I'm going to prevent you from having a disaster at all. But there's steps we need to take. There's things we need to evaluate to ensure that you're put in a position to be successful in advance.
Now, are those like structural? Obviously, with natural disasters, with things that are related to weather, it's got to be structural issues. Because I know I'm from California. I went through the Northridge earthquake and then moved my butt to Nashville. And then, of course, now we have tornadoes. And, of course, all the hurricanes going on with my family in Louisiana. But it's interesting. So is that a big part of what you do then, Patrick, where you say, okay, you just went through this hurricane. Now we got to figure out the next time you have a hurricane, how to build this structure, this business, this house, this whatever it is, school, so that when we go through another one, it won't be like that. Is that part of it? Do you work like with FEMA, or do you work with construction people, or how does that work in that situation?
I work it from a managerial perspective, and I look at everyone. I look at everyone from what I like to call a tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is Latin for blank slate. So when
Mhm.
I go to a property or I work with a business, I say, first thing I want to know is, what are your dependencies? That is
Okay.
the first thing I want to find out. And I wrote about this in my book. I specifically said, if you want to eliminate disasters, this is how you do it. You eliminate your dependencies. You eliminate the dependencies, you eliminate the disaster.
I see.
Period. End of discussion. People go, what do you mean dependencies? And I say, well, okay, if we have a situation like let's not use hurricanes for right now because that's really in people's mind. Let's talk
Mhm.
about something that's maybe going on but it's not really in people's mind at this minute is wildfires. Okay, so let's say you live in a place, and if you live in Northern California, and Jenny, you understand about Northern
Yep.
California, okay, there are areas that are clearly wildfire prone. And what a lot of people forget is the biggest concern regarding wildfires have nothing to do with the flames, nothing to do with the heat. It has to do with the smoke, right? People
Oh.
inhaling smoke, because when people have respiratory compromise, when they have immunocompromise, these are things that can exacerbate these problems. So what I tell people in advance is I say, when you are evaluating a wildfire, the dependency is this: who are you depending on to help you evacuate? Who are you
Mhm.
depending on to shelter you? Who are you depending on to feed you? Because when people have no preparedness, I say, okay, it's not that you haven't prepared. You have prepared, sort of. You've just let FEMA prepare you. And
Mhm.
and when I tell people all the time, it's as if you asked the DMV to train you how to drive. It'd be
Yeah.
like that. How many of you would volunteer for that? Have the DMV teach you how to drive, teach you to do that. I mean, like lines are going to be a mile long, right? I mean, nobody would do that, right? So what I tell people is, I said, that's the equivalent when you have FEMA or some emergency management agency, their disaster plan, that's now your disaster plan. You have a plan. You just a plan you're never going to read or care
Mhm.
about. Those plans are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and you're sharing them with 900, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people. So what I say is, let's eliminate that dependency. I tell audiences this story all the time. When I was a little boy, I love mint chocolate chip ice cream. That's like my thing. I love mint chocolate chip ice cream. So every night I used to get it when I was a little kid. And finally one night, my parents, for some, I don't know what happened. They can't remember why. I've asked them recently. They can't remember why. But just one day they decided to stop doing that. They're not going to give me ice cream every night. So my brother and I would be sitting there eating dinner. We'd be like hungrily thinking, okay, dessert's coming, and then they wouldn't give it to us. And I turn to my mom and I go, well, why aren't we having mint chocolate chip ice cream anymore? And my mom said, there's something you need to learn about ice cream. It's nice, but not necessary. And so when it happens, when you get it, that's great. Otherwise, it's no big deal, because dinner is what's important. That's what my parents try and teach me. Dinner is important. So what I tell people all the time is, treat FEMA, treat charities, treat the Red Cross, treat those firefighters that are wearing the badges and the uniforms, treat them like ice cream. Nice, but not necessary. Because if you depend on them to take care of everything on your behalf, you are welcoming disaster. You are welcoming a disaster to occur. When you put yourself in a position where you have lowered those dependencies, now you have something that's far more focused. And the thing I talk about now all the time is, I say, instead of thinking about disaster plans and stuff, well, actually, what I've been emphasizing in with my clients, and the way I do emergency management is different than anyone else, is I say, I want you to focus on the things that you absolutely have to have, those critical things you've got to have, and put it all in a backpack, in a really good
Oh.
backpack. So when I look at someone's life, or when I look at someone's business, I say, what do you have access? What do you have to have access to keep working? So let's go to since we don't have a whole lot of time here, let's just kind of skip back to the salon in Zimbabwe, right? They have to
Mhm.
pay their bills like anyone else. if someone's giving you a currency that tomorrow isn't going to be worth anything, then all of a sudden you're depending on the currency to not be inflated tomorrow, right? So what I told them was, I said, let's create your own currency so that you can operate. So it's a currency just used at your business. And then all of a sudden, the dependency on that 10,000% inflation piece of paper that people hand you, all of a sudden you don't need it anymore. Right? When I think about food or shelter, I say to people, where do you plan to go? Oh, I'll just call so and so. I'll go, have you asked them? Do they know this is your plan?
If you're
And
living with them for 6 months.
right, exactly. If you made them, they go, oh, I'm sure. And I said, all of a sudden, Aunt Minnie is now, you are now dependent on her to say yes. If she says no, now you've got a big problem. Now a disaster is occurring because now you're driving to nowhere. You don't know where you're going anymore. So what I tell people is, we create, we traditionally consider sort of backups and things, but I do that with everything in people's life. I look at sheltering and clothing, and even psychologically, I tell people, if you're traumatized in a wildfire, or something happens to one of your pets, or something happens to, God forbid, a family member, how are we going to fortify you so that we appropriately grieve and we appropriately get stronger afterwards? We don't say positive. I mean, we say we're going to get stronger afterwards. And what are we going to do to make ourselves stronger for next time? Because if we choose to live in a place where there's going to be tornadoes,
Right.
or we choose to live a place where there's going to be earthquakes, or we choose to live a place where there's going to be hurricanes, we have to lower those dependencies. And I tell people, if you lower those dependencies, the disaster suddenly disappears.
Is palpable.
All right, so I just want to be really clear. So your primary goal is to go in and help them figure out a plan when a disaster hits. You started
Yeah.
out by the letter when Katrina hit to Louisiana, and they brought you in after the disaster. So do you do both still, or do you just focus on pre-planning for disasters?
I've done both. I do mostly pre-planning. So like I'll have a high net worth family will call me and say, listen, I've got estates, I've got family that's posted all over the place. I need you to go and take care of work with my family offices and help us to do that. So I will work with them and figure out where the dependencies, they got a kid in Switzerland who's in boarding school. They got a kid in college in the Ivies. We got somebody over here. We got a critical family member over here. You're going to find this funny too. I've even had high net worth families who've actually called me and said, hey, listen, my husband has a girlfriend. We can't tell anybody about her, but you have to write a disaster plan with her too. And I'm like, okay, then, you never, I guess, what I mean? Just go whatever, right? And I've done that with businesses too. I say, tell me what businesses you're operating. What do you want this plan to cover? And so I will prepare them. And one of the things I do when I talk to families is that I say, if your pet is your family member, and I know my cat is my family member, I would never leave without Buster, period. And so one of the things I say is I'm going to create a disaster backpack just for Buster. That's not for me. That's not for anyone else. That's just for her because she's depending on me. And so because she has to depend on me. And so I have to say, I'm not going to rely on the Humane Society to shelter her. I'm already going to determine in advance where we're going, what she needs. I'll already have things prepared so that when we go, she gets crated. I have her backpack with everything in it. I'm done. I'm not racing around. And then you know what? The disaster, and then for Buster, she hates being in the car. So, but nevertheless, other than that, everything else in that situation, I don't have to worry about something happening to her. You know what I mean? Something like that. And that's the same with people. If we're a caregiver, for a child or an elderly parent. We say we create it so that they're not dependent on someone else to handle it for them.
So what's the largest disaster that you have? Was it the Valdez? Was it the oil spill? Patrick, what's the largest disaster you've had to manage? And I mean, have you had big corporations say, I need you to come in here and fix, my 10,000 employees or that kind of thing? Or do you ever do keynotes to teach people how to, do you ever educate as well? Where you go into a
do.
Yeah.
I do. I keynote all the time. I keynote nationally and internationally. So I speak around the country and I do executive coaching. I do one-on-ones. I've actually had this where Fortune 500 companies, I actually had a large pharmaceutical company on the East Coast. They called me and said, we need you to design our emergency operations center, which is a center where basically command will occur during an emergency. So I literally went in a room and I'm not kidding you. I walked in a room and all there was in there was a table. and a couple chairs. And I was like, okay. And they said, design this thing from scratch. So I said, okay, fine. I looked at the scope of it. I flew back to Baton Rouge. I designed it. I got all the equipment, everything got shipped, and I ended up spending days there, putting everything into place. So that's the kind of thing I've done. I train employees all the time. I'll do that. Big companies will hire me and say, hey, listen, will you come in and train this group of folks? I will do those things now. And for me, one of the things I just try to do is I try to empower people, because I'm not a traditional kind of guy that walks and says, okay, going to do this in an evacuation and then this and then this. I tell people I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm going to train you like I would train someone to read a cookbook, because a disaster plan, I believe disaster plans should read exactly like cookbooks, which is it gives you the ingredients and gives you the steps. And yes, I mean, I don't know if you do like to cook. I love to cook. The Louisianans taught me about cooking. I learned
They all cook in
so
my
much.
family.
Oh,
my son has a chef. My son got his chef certificate in Louisiana, in Lafayette.
Oh, there, no better place to do it. Matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, Jen. Did you know this? There's more than 200 different kinds of jambalaya. There's a jambalaya festival.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't believe it, and I literally thought there clearly can't be that many. And I went with my then girlfriend, and we were literally going. And but just one spoonful at a time. I got full. I ate 200 spoonfuls of different kinds of jambalayas.
That's the way gumbo is. Yeah.
I learned that too. I learned about, for example, things like sassafras and lobster oil, things I never, crab oil, things I'd never used before. I went to my first, crab bake. I mean, these things I was like, crab oil, things I've just never done before. But what I say to people is I say, if you like to cook, you'll understand this, is that sometimes you just got to make stuff up. Something isn't working and you're going, that butter should be an emulsifier. And you know what? For some reason, it's not working. So you know what? I got to add a little bit of olive oil in here. Or I got to add a reduction, or I have to add something else. And you have to do that on the fly, because it's cooking. The food doesn't care that you messed up or that something isn't working for some reason. It's still cooking everything. So you got to sort it out on the fly. What I say to people is I say, if I can train you, A, to read the cookbook, B, I can train you how to do things on your feet, and 3, I can teach you how to take responsibility for when something happens, all of a sudden, you're now empowered to act within the disaster plan. If you don't, that's when it becomes a disaster, because then events will spiral out of control, because now you're dependent on other people. You're basically a bystander. That's why I say to people all the time. I wrote that in my book. I said, listen, you're going to become a bystander. And when you are standing by and you are a bystander, what a bystander means is I'm standing by, letting events occur around me. I have no stake in the events happening around me. And I say to people, I don't care. And I do this all the time in companies. I'll literally run a drill. And so the management will always be like prepared, like, okay, I'm going to run the drill. And I said, no, you're actually not. In fact, you're not even going to be in the drill for the first half hour. And they get shocked. And then I turn the room and I say, I want to know who's been here the least amount of time, who has the least amount of experience in this place, who knows this place the very least. And I'll get somebody in the back who's usually trying to, avoid my gaze. And I'll pick that person. I'll say, you're in charge of this disaster response for the first half hour. And they'll get freaked out. And I say, no, we're not going to freak out. The same way that Rachel Ray makes me a good chef is the same way I'm going to make you a good disaster responder, because I'm going to show you the recipe. I'm going to show you how to do it. Is it going to be perfect? No. Just like my chicken bolognese is not perfect. Rachel does it well, better in 30 minutes. It takes me an hour to do it. You know what I mean? But I will sort it out and get it done. And that's what I'm going to do to you. And that's when I find the best, is when I turn to people and I say, you think you're a bystander? You're not. You're in charge. I'm going to empower you. And if I can do that with the person with the least amount of experience, with the least amount of time, I can do that for anybody. Give me some time. And the last thing I always say to companies, I always say this, I always say, listen, I can tell you right now if you're going to have a disaster or not. I can tell you this very minute. There's things I can do, trainings and drills, and I can determine if you're going to or not based on that. And then that's how I begin to eliminate those dependencies and get them resilient.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Patrick, this is so amazing. Hey, what's 1 or 2 things you want to leave our listeners with since we kind of wind down here?
First thing is, I want you to change your philosophy. Every single time you deal with an incident, every single time, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, a tsunami, runaway inflation, anything that keeps you up at night. And don't, I want the sky's the limit for you. Whatever it is, I want you to have this philosophy. If I do nothing, no one else will either. If I do nothing, no one else will either. That will force you in every instance to look at everything. If you buy a backpack and you say, oh, I got this backpack, it's zip tied. I do this all the time. I'll actually take a backpack, and whenever a client buys one, they say, well, you look at it, and I go, okay. And I take the backpack and I shake everything out of it. And they go, why'd you do that? It was perfectly organized. And I said, you are depending on the company to give you the perfect flashlight. Do you even know if the batteries work? And even this, I'll do this. I'll actually chop up the food, there's usually like a pellet in there, an MRE. I'll cut that thing up and they'll say, what are you doing? And I say, I'm preparing you lunch. Go, why? You know what I mean? Because you're going to eat it right now. Yeah. And why do I have to eat it right now? Because I have to make sure you can eat it. I mean, we deal in the world where there's vegans and gluten-free. Yeah. In fact, I have a video I'm creating. I evaluated 10 companies, disaster food, regular, gluten-free, and vegan. And I tell people, here are the advantages. Here's what they taste like. So that's the first takeaway. The second takeaway I want to do is something I emphasized earlier. You never have to experience a disaster in your entire life. Never, ever, ever. A hurricane is not a disaster until you let it be one. Right. So how do we eliminate it? We focus on our dependencies, the things that we rely on. If I can fortify your dependencies, I can guarantee you until the day you take your final breath of oxygen upon this spinning blue marble, I can guarantee you'll never, ever, ever experience a disaster again. And that's a philosophy I take. And that's how I work with small businesses, because small businesses don't have 10,000-page disaster plans. They don't have time for that. We don't have time for big trainings. They don't have time for all this stuff. So I learned how to very quickly develop it. And I've worked with bars and restaurants and nursing homes and alligator farms and salons in Zimbabwe. Everywhere I've worked, I tell people, I'm going to position you to be successful. If I can do that, then every time you have one of those instances, you will be stronger afterwards, not weaker. That is how I will truly eliminate the disaster. If I prepare, and the motto I always say at the end of every YouTube video is, prepare for a disaster and you'll never experience one.
Yep.
Oh,
that's great. Love it. Patrick, thanks so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Go on to my website at disasterpatrick.com, normal spelling, nothing weird, disasterpatrick.com. And also go on my YouTube page, which, oh, by the way, is Disaster Patrick. So definitely go on there, interact with me. I've got some incredible videos. I evacuated 230 cats in 90 minutes to show people it could be done. I've got a lot of great videos. I just broke the world record. I did 28 hours of continuous CPR. So just doing a lot of really difficult things to show people that if you truly prepare for these disasters, you truly prepare for these things, you will never experience one. A disaster for someone else doesn't have to be one for you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jana. And I appreciate the opportunity to have our conversation today.
Appreciate you so much, Patrick. And I love what you do. Yeah. It's really unique and it's really needed. So thank you for what you do as well. To all our listeners out there, we just hope that you enjoyed today's segment, and that if you want to avoid disasters, get a hold of Patrick. He can help you do that. Until the next time, stay safe and be healthy.